Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Dead Ringers Episode 1. This is a new show from Amazon Prime, which is, I don't know if it's based on the movie or the movie and the show are both based on like the same book exactly, but it was a David Cronenberg movie a long time ago starring Jeremy Irons, which I've not seen. But this new version is 6 episodes, and it stars Rachel Weisz in the lead roles of the two twin sisters, who are gynecologists. And I'll start spoiler free because it's an episode 1, and we'll go into this one. The pilot vote on Patreon, which is why we're talking about it. That's not to say that it wasn't interesting in and of itself. I mean, the first thing that's really striking in this series is the performance of Rachel Weisz as both sisters. She is really flexing her muscles, not just because both sisters are very different, but like just doing a variety of very different things. Like one sister is more outrageous, more sexually active, more confident, will talk trash to people and things like that. The other sister's a bit more timid, but more passionate and thoughtful, and really believes in their work. Their entire goal is to open a new birthing clinic that sort of is outside the system, because a lot of this show, at least from this first episode, seems to be looking at the problems of the system when it comes to childbirth and the way that women are treated and the options they have, and the way that the system just kind of chews them up and spits them out, and the complications that arise because of that. And the whole goal for them, especially Beverly, the more, I guess, how would I describe her, the more kind of ambitious of the two. She like really wants to create this new place and try and advance things forward a little bit. So this first episode is over an hour long. It's like an hour and 5 minutes, and the first half of it, almost after a little introduction, there's like a good half or so of this episode that is just a day in the hospital with them working with different patients. And there's actually a warning right at the start of the episode that there's extreme visuals of childbirth in this, and that is accurate. And there's a montage early on in this episode where you will see a baby's head coming out of a vagina. So you have to be aware of that, because if you're squeamish, if you don't want to see any of that stuff, it's it's a bit much. There's a lot to take in, and it's definitely a show that's going for extremes. It's going for extremes, and obviously not shying away from the subject matter that it's tackling. And I think it feels justified. I mean, I think you can debate if it should still show the level of which it does show stuff, but I think the show itself and the people making the show feel justified, because the whole point is to show the absolute raw, unfiltered, that's what this world is, and these are the things that should be better about it. Here's are the things that should go. So yeah, I mean, that's the basic gist. Obviously, we follow kind of like maybe a potential love interest for one of them and stuff like that in this first episode, and that'll probably be plot for the whole story. So, and they're trying to get funding for their new clinic, because they're not rich. I mean, obviously they're well off. They're both, well-paid doctors, but they're looking for funding, like millions of dollars, to open this clinic, and it shows kind of the tough stuff they have to go through to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, the positives are relatively numerous here, honestly. Like the performance from the lead actress Rachel Weisz is very good, right? I mean, first off, she's just, this is almost like an actor's dream, to just like be able to do this much with so many different sides of two different characters. And she literally has not only a lot of screen time, she often has double screen time where she's playing two roles at the same time. So obviously that stuff is great, and she's up to the task. It feels like she's having the time of her life as an actress, to be honest. I think the other positives that strike out to me is there is a directorial style. It does feel like it's going for something. It feels like it's got a very confident hand in how it's presenting its subject. And I would also say that just from I don't know what the original book was like. I know that it was a male set of twins in the Cronenberg movie, which I've not seen. But I don't know if this is a change for this show, or this is like a more authentic representation of the book. But I think this being a female set of sisters, alongside the supporting cast, who are all predominantly female, I do think is actually a really strong choice on the show's part. It feels like a show with a set of characters, two gynecologists, you've got a potential love interest for one of the sisters, and you've got the potential financier who's going to back this new clinic is also a woman. You've got this subject that is predominantly about women. It's about what they go through. It's about childbirth. It's about like how they're treated by the system. Why aren't things better? But you've got this subject being discussed almost entirely by women in this show. You've got women who care about it. You've got women trying to convince other women that they should care about it. Here's the problems that we have to deal with. Obviously, it brings up this idea of how certain women feel when they're told they can't have babies, when they're struggling. You know, that's part of the, you know, a lot of the scenes we get in the hospital. It's not just the births and the C-sections and the potential complications during the actual, you know, birthing process. It's also just the appointments with people where they're saying, you're having trouble conceiving, here's why, or you might never conceive, here's why, and just the emotional like fallout from that. I think that's actually this show's biggest strength. Is probably the biggest scene in the episode is there's a scene about, I don't know, 2/3 in, maybe just a little before that, but it's them meeting this, you know, this rich woman who's potentially going to fund, and it's a meeting to, you know, for them to convince her to like back this this project. And Rachel Weisz just ends up giving this speech about why it's important, and she's trying to convince this other woman. It's the best scene in the episode, and it's kind of making a case for like what the show's talking about in a lot of ways. The rest of the episode gets into the nuances and the struggles of their lives, and kind of like how much they're going through trying to like make this real and trying to improve everything for everyone else, and how sympathetic some of their patients are, how unsympathetic some of the other patients are. You know, there's a really awful rich like mother who's having a surrogate deliver her baby, and she is just like you can feel Rachel Weisz's character wanting to strangle her, and I think the audience wants to strangle her because she's this uptight rich woman. She's basically a Karen who's in a, you know, in the hospital saying that she's the patient because it's technically her baby, but she's not actually the one giving birth. She's not the one who's actually going through the medical procedures and has the risk of something bad maybe happening if the pregnancy goes awry. So it really presents a lot of different female characters with different voices. Many of them at the center very well rounded and fleshed out, and I think that for that is obviously one of the more. And I mean, hell, the opening scene of this show is the two sisters in a diner or whatever, and some guy starts making pervy comments, and it's just kind of like the more raunchy of the two sisters like fighting back and like belittling them and making fun of them for daring to do so. But the whole point is that right away, this is their perspective on this. This is, you know, it's almost like the opening scene saying, if you're going to be an annoying man and ask stupid questions, just don't. Like, stay at the side. This is for us to talk about. I will say the first episode does have an ending that I thought was a little confusing. I didn't quite get exactly what the ending of the episode was saying from a plot perspective. I wasn't sure if something. I wasn't sure if we jumped ahead in time. I wasn't sure if something was just a lie, and there was something else going on. So the last couple of minutes were a little confusing, but for the most part, like, I have very little to really complain about outside of maybe just the length of the episode and the density of it. You know, like I said, this is an hour and 5 minutes. I'm not so sure if there's anything I would cut necessarily. Maybe some stuff in the. I think in the early half, I was thinking maybe there's too much of this day-to-day life in the hospital stuff because it was going on for a while. But when we got to the big speech in the second half where she's trying to convince why they need to change the system, all of a sudden that first half hour in the hospital was completely justified because the chaos of jumping from patient to patient, the turmoil when something goes wrong with a patient, like all that stuff, and just and some of it's just administrative like fumbling. You know, some of it's just there's no one to go look after a patient right now, and just all these little things that feel like a gauntlet for them to go through on a daily basis. All of a sudden, all that felt very worthwhile because this big speech, like, all of a sudden, this speech she's making is backed up by everything you've just seen. And it's the sort of thing where this is, and she's convincing another woman of this, because even most women won't necessarily know what this is like, and how bad this is. Um, some women will never give birth. Some women will maybe give birth, but they'll just see their side of the experience, and they won't necessarily see the larger scale or all of the other people who have less smooth experiences, sometimes tragic experiences. So I think it did a really good job of putting over all of these ideas, and its strength really is just kind of feeling like you're getting a really tough look at a subject from a really specific set of voices. In this case, all women, but it feels given the subject, it feels absolutely appropriate that it is all women. And the one or two male characters that are there are very minimal. Some of them are just buffling, but buffoons who are nothing but like easy to trick perverts, and that's kind of it, because that's kind of the world that these characters are occupying. So yeah, it's a very strong start of a story in that sense, and it's definitely a tour de force of a performance for Rachel Weisz, for both sisters, and it plays with the twin stuff. Like I don't know what the movie or the book did, but this idea that they literally swap over a couple of times because one's uncomfortable with a patient, so they'll do a switcheroo and things like that. And playing with this idea that they can rely on each other in this way that's really unconventional. Most people can't just swap out to someone else who's confident in different ways than they are, because that's easier. So I wonder if thematically, as the story goes on, if that'll become more of an issue, and maybe more of like a sort of crutch that they rely on too much, and maybe explore some of that stuff. I actually don't know if this goes into more science fiction territory. I don't think there's anything in this first episode that really is, but there is a little bit of research being done that potentially, and just because and this is really just because I know it was a Cronenberg movie, and I just assumed it was at least partially science fiction. I feel like maybe that might veer into that territory, but that is just complete baseless speculation. Like, it's like I can see what in the show could become slightly, fictionalized science, but in the first episode it's just kind of theoretical, and they're just kind of talking about it a little bit. But very, very interesting. It's a very stark show that doesn't really hold back any of the subjects that it's presenting, and it's not afraid to present its main characters as very flawed individuals. That's the thing, that this time you spend with these two sisters, like, you get like a lot of flaws for both of them. Things they rely on, weaknesses they have, vices they have. They don't really necessarily feel like these squeaky clean characters by any means. But what they're arguing for is certainly what Beverly, the more passionate one's arguing for, is completely just, and you understand why she feels so deeply about it and why it's something that she's pushing for. And it makes it feel a little bit more strengthened, because the characters do feel a little bit more fleshed out to begin with. So, I mean, it's a strong piece of writing, a strong performance, absolutely, with a reasonably strong direction throughout. Like I say, the runtime is the one thing that just feels a little bit too much of an episode. I do wonder if some of the they do a whole, like, the back half has a lot of like a love interest subplot, and I do wonder, none of it's bad, but I do wonder if maybe some of it could have been held back. Maybe if instead of 6 episodes you made it 8 episodes, and you just kind of spread things out a little bit, just to make it a bit less of a daunting episode in one sitting. It's not like a big critique, but it's just something that I definitely felt a little bit a few times in the episode, where I was like, oh geez, there's a lot to this. And I haven't checked the runtime of the following episodes, but if I'm assuming that they're all kind of similar, then maybe that's something they could have looked at, just for sort of more friendly chaptering as opposed to what they've done. But like, there's not a whole lot to really complain about, honestly. The only thing that the warning that I would give, and this goes alongside the warning of seeing the graphic birth scenes and things like that, is that it is quite hard hitting with the way it's tackling the subject. It's kind of unforgiving in a lot of ways, and if you think this is a tough subject to watch, especially if you're someone who has lost a baby, for example, if you've had miscarriages and things like that, yeah, it may be too tough to watch. Like, it's the sort of thing that I would definitely put a trigger warning, and they do put a trigger warning. But I'm saying I agree with it. I agree that it's probably wise to warn people and say, this doesn't just broach the topic. This isn't just one character saying, "Oh, I've went through this in the past," and it's a part of their backstory. This is constantly the subject that's being brought up. There are very, uncensored visuals of things. It's not pulling punches when it's talking about this subject. And that's what it wants to be, and that's fine. But you have to kind of know that going in. So I would definitely warn people before they jump in, if that's something that they might have a problem with. But yeah, so no, it's a solid pilot. I would certainly, it's been out for about a week now. If you haven't checked it out on Amazon, I would probably give it a look if it sounds appealing based on what I've said. And credit to it, because I think when I heard this was coming, and obviously I knew the movie existed, there's kind of an assumption just naturally that it's kind of a remake of sorts, that maybe it's going to just kind of feel worthless. And I don't know what the movie is. Like I said, I've not seen the movie, but I think just the fact that the fact that all of the characters in this, all the prominent characters are women in this, just felt so right and natural for the subject that it's talking about, that I have to imagine that even if the movie's great, and I think it's well respected, people seem to like it, this seems to offer something different and more unique, and perhaps more fitting to the subject. So definitely worth checking out. But that's my thoughts on the pilot for Dead Ringers, the new show. I didn't really do a spoiler section. I don't really have much. I mean, I suppose I could talk about the ending and why it confused me, but because it legitimately is confusing. So I guess, yeah, just quick spoiler warning for the ending. But it seems like we jump ahead, and one of the for spoilers, just I did that quite quickly. I'm just making clear we're spoiler territory for episode 1. So it seems like we jump ahead maybe, and Beverly's at a support group and says that her sister's dead, but then we cut to her sister in a bathroom screaming. So I'm not sure if she's lying and she's not really dead, or if we've actually jumped ahead in time and she's dead, and then we've jumped back to her when she was alive. I don't actually know. I'm sure it's something the second episode probably makes more clear quite quickly. But as an end of episode 1, I found it quite confusing, and I had no idea what it just did and what it was telling me. So worth mentioning. But that is Dead Ringers episode 1. Let me know what you thought of this episode, and indeed the whole show if you've watched, because all 6 episodes went out binge style. So let me know what you thought of the whole show if you've watched it in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?